Right. Warm welcome. Good morning, all. So this morning we are talking contracts, and as you mentioned in the email last night, and if you saw it, is this confusion? Is it clarity? Is it complication? Was it absolutely necessary? What value do contracts have in business? Do they have value? And do we overcomplicate things, or does it actually simplify them? So it's going to be an interesting discussion, I hope. I certainly think it's probably going to be a fairly robust discussion. So I'm looking forward to this one. So I think I'm going to kick off with Trevor Carty this morning, seeing that it is his topic that he suggested yesterday, and we'll take it from there. Morning, Nazipa. Welcome back. All right. So Trevor, over to you.
All right. Morning. Yeah, contracts. I think we really got to not tread lightly here. We got to manhandle this subject. It's not for pussies. It's just you got to get up there and say, how's it in the beginning? When the main cat made man, he said, dude, there's only one rule, and the rule is don't eat this thing. And then he said, okay, cool. And he brings the chick in, and he tells the chick, this is the deal. We can't eat this thing. And they don't put it in writing, and it's all lacquer until, guess what? We break the first contract. And we know the outcome of that was sin, and it's continued all the way to the current time. And yeah, is a contract necessary? I think it's about the outcome of what you're trying to achieve. And it does two things. The first thing that a contract does is it records what the nature of the transaction is going to be. And a decent contract says exactly that. It says party A does this, party B does this, who's responsible for what, how we pick up those expenses, and how the revenues are shared. And it's not easy to do. This is my 31st year in business, and having run financial services businesses for all 31 of those years, it still amazes me when I go into organizations that have more than one shareholder. And I say, well, let's quickly have a look at your buy and sell agreement. And they look at me like I've just crawled out of their water purifier. Well, there are three of us in this business. We're equal shareholders, and it's all sweet until something isn't sweet, like someone dies, or someone gets disabled, or we have a listing coming up, or we have someone offer to make us a chunky offer to buy our business out and to get us out of the business. So for me, contracts are an evil that need a lot of concerning time and discerning time. And they need, I think where it goes pear-shaped is when you bring in someone who charges time to write up a contract as a third party, because then you are really playing with chojos. Three parties can sit down and knock out a one-pager that is so simple. They take that then to a LLB candidate officer. You get charged by the page. So they want to see as many pages. Then they get charged by time. So they want to see how long they can keep you there. Then they want to see how many drafts you can get before you find. And by the time it's out, you're so confused, you don't know what you've really done. And you've moved away from your one pager that the three of you had to start the day. So, I've been fortunate enough to enter into a couple of business relationships and a couple of personal relationships. And at the end of the day, contracts really only come into force when things go belly up, when they go into a shape that's not really a shape. And then it's a function of, well, what did the contract look like, and who was protecting who where? Because man, my first divorce was the messiest thing I've ever done. And that was because when we got married, my first wife didn't understand the function of a trust. My second wife, she was my lawyer. So when we got married, we had a very, very simple dissolution contract. And it was so simple that we did it again after we dissolved the first time. Now I'm going into it for the third time. And The complications at 55, when you've built a bit of this and a bit of that, and you've got fingers in all these other pies, is even more complicated. So, and then there are my business relationships. Man, I tell you, on some occasions, I would have liked to have killed my partners, except that I found out some of them hadn't paid their premiums on their life insurance. So killing them was just going to mean extra admin for me. Yeah, so contracts. Let's see what the rest of the group have got to say about them, whether they're necessary, unnecessary. But commercially, I think every commercial transaction needs at least a basic one-page understanding of the contract.
Great, thanks, Trevor. Yeah, a brave man going through so many complications in your life. But anyway, all very interesting, and yeah, lots of food for thought there. So, Vinay, let's come to you next. I think being our company secretary.
I must admit with Trevor that I've read some contracts that are 100 pages long that could be one. And one of the guys I work with is a director and senior partner at Deloitte, and he can create contracts that are so complicated that nobody actually knows what's going on. But he also has the belief that a contract is only as good as the people that sign it. That if your intentions are good at the beginning, the contract is going to withstand scrutiny. And I agree with Trevor that it should be simple. It should just be a list of duties and obligations and who gets what. And also, I mean, I do a lot of due diligence on companies, and there are basic contracts that just don't exist, you know, like a rental agreement. I mean, you know, something simple like that. And I have been involved when a shareholder has died and nobody actually knows what to do with the shares. How do they get handled? Do they go to the wife? Do they go to the family? And yeah, I really believe that they're necessary, but I also believe that it's necessary to set up a relationship, and bringing in a third party to actually do that contract does complicate things. If 2 or 3 people can sit down and say, this is what we agreed to, they are then committed to it. They're not being told what they must do. They are then committed to it. And I really think it depends more on the relationship with the person that you entering a contract into it than with the actual quality of the contract itself. And I'm going to get shot by any attorney that listens to that. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Vinay. Yeah, some people get paid to make things complicated, and some people should be paid to make them simple. But yeah, I'm not sure that it always happens that way around. So, Steve, let's get across to you next.
Thanks, Ivan. I'm chuckling, Vinay, because I think lawyers make a lot of money off the distrust between people. I think it's probably 80% of their business. Apologies if anyone is a lawyer on this group. I don't think so. I think we have more stringent controls in terms of who's allowed into these conversations. Thanks, Trevor. I've 3 simple thoughts in terms of contracts. I'm somewhere between good fences make good neighbors, the idea of, you know, setting out good terms, and that's a good way in which to initiate relationship. And on the other side, if you can't trust a person's word, you can't trust their paper. And so I think the paper is valueless unless you're able to enter into a honoring relationship with others. But I do think that some of the value in contracts, you know, when I do visioning and mission work with organizations, one of the great benefits of that about writing something down on paper is it really forces you to think through what it is that you're saying and what it is that you're doing. Because as soon as you have to write it down and formulate it and stick it in a book or on a wall or something, we pay more attention to the words we're using rather than, we'll just figure it out when we get there. So I think there is great benefit to thinking through a contract, and I would go with a page or so, an MOU, rather than employing a lawyer at 4,000 Rand a word to give you a thesis. So yeah, that for me would be very simple. I think I'd love nothing to do with contracts and just rely on people. But I also agree that you can set some things out in front of you, which makes a lot more sense. Cool, thanks.
Great, thanks, Steve. All right, Cecile, are you with us this morning? Or you're in your usual multitasking mode?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't have a lot of contracts in our business, except for when people take fiber with us. It is quite simple. Everyone loves to not read the other fiber contracts to say. Everyone says, oh, it's a month-to-month contract, lekker. They want to do the contract, and then after 6 months, they want to move house, and now all of a sudden they want to give up their contract. So any fiber contract, you will read the fine print. The fine print will say that the installation is free upfront because it's a promotion. But the minute you cancel before 12 months, you will be liable for the installation fee, which is somewhere 2,700 Rand. We write it in big. Now, the model is that we have with our one fiber supplier, is all the fiber contracts are in our name. So if our customers default, we're still liable to pay, and then we've got to get the money out of them. So when they default, we get immediately, we will get the penalty fee. So when we try and tell them about that, they are up in arms and this and that, and everyone is mad. But we do tell them up front, we put it in big, bold, red writing, that if you leave before 12 months, you will be immediately liable for the installation fee. So we've had a few customers that are now very angry with us because we charge them that, and we've had a few that just refuse to pay that. So instead of parting on good ways, I part on very bad ways with some of my customers because I'm liable for their 2,700 Rand. Then we've got another one. Now, this will also be funny to all of you, but it wasn't so funny at the time. A customer who entered into a contract for 5 years because he wanted, when he started his business, he wanted to have a contract that made all his phones and his fiber and things cheap. When COVID, so it's a 5-year contract. When COVID hit, the first thing he wrote to us is, can he have a payment holiday? Now, tell me which one of you have a payment holiday with Vodacom or MTN or whatever. When you go overseas for 3 months, does Vodacom say to you, you know what, you're not going to use your phone for 3 months. You can stop paying for the next 3 months. No, they don't. So we told the customer, no, you can't have a payment holiday. It's not our fault that you're not there to use your services. So then when they cancel, they are liable for 5 years, or they were 1 year into the contract, for 4 years. So my word, that we have a hoo-ha about that. And if they cancel their contract, I'm liable for their 5 years penalties that they are going to pay, not just the cancellation fee. So yeah, so I think contracts are very important, and to actually tell the people that enter into the contract with you upfront what let's say the penalties are going to be if you duck out of this contract. But yeah, we still have people that are up in arms after they've signed the contract, a simple one-line contract. Anyway, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Cecile. Yeah, it's always a challenge. People think they can sign things and then they don't matter. So yeah, the question is, where does that take you? So, Johan, first time with us. You've walked into an interesting topic, I think. I'm sure in your business you've probably got a few contracts floating around. So let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think contracts are definitely an interesting topic. And unfortunately a necessary evil, as are those penguin-suited vultures that are the only people who actually win in any litigation action. So having been through some litigation action, I can attest to the fact that a well-written contract is going to save your bacon or screw the pooch, as the saying goes. The unfortunate reality is a saying that I picked up from a business associate of mine a few years ago, is that contracts are signed with the best of intentions and used with the worst. So whenever you go into a contract, read it with that in mind, that if you need to use it, it's going to be used in the worst possible way. And hopefully that helps protect you against if you're the person that's on the hook for the contract, and well, you're on the hook if you're a service provider as well, because you have a service to deliver. So make sure that your contracts are well written, the responsibilities are clear, and that you're protected in both directions. Unfortunately, the finickiness or the trickeries in legal entanglements makes it that one poorly written email could blow your whole case out of the water, which is effectively what happened to us. So it's unfortunately a horrible thing. And again, we're all friends when we want to do something together, and if things start going sideways, then the personalities and the real person starts coming out. So that's when resilience or vindictiveness shows its face. You don't know that when you meet someone around a boardroom table and you're having coffee together. So they're there to protect you, but it's not the be all and end all. And maybe I would potentially just want to touch on something that Cecile mentioned in the what is that, connectivity commodity space. I think that's unfortunately a very a horrible business that's going to become harder and harder, because it's a commodity that's a race to the bottom. We all want month-to-month contracts. I must be honest, I refuse to sign long-term connectivity contracts, because you sign a 2-year contract, and in 2-year time the cost of connectivity changes so dramatically that 2-year contract starts costing you quite a bit at the end. I think it's just maybe an opinion of mine that there's too much of this, we're going to give you free stuff and then hide the free stuff in the duration of the contract. So cell phone contracts, I don't have a cell phone contract anymore. I have a contracted cell phone agreement. In other words, I pay a monthly fee and I don't have to worry about it. I don't do pay as you go. I'll forget to top up my phone and then I won't have a phone. But I don't do a cell phone contract where you get a free phone, because the phone isn't free. It's built into the cost of your contract. So just buy your own phone, buy your own router, sort out your own installations and connectivity, or pay for the installation, because it's still a service. Somebody has to get paid to do it. And then it's a lot cleaner from that perspective. But I think it's certainly in that world, having anything that's not a month to month is, as a consumer, it's the wrong way to go about it. And unfortunately, it isn't great for the provider like a Cecile. So that's the that's my 5 cents on that topic. I think, yes, sorry, so there was one other thing. Simplicity and clarity, yes, very, very valuable, but also, still making sure that you cover all the bases. Sorry, that was just, I was making notes as people were speaking.
That's great. Thanks, Jan. It is interesting. And I mean, one of my business associates always used to say, you always design the contract for the divorce, not for the marriage. Yep. So I think that's one things one has to think of. And then, when you're in the throes of a new relationship, we don't tend to necessarily think of the divorce. So yeah. Right. So Ed, FSB, how do you guys handle it over there in the UK?
Yeah, well, I actually this morning I thought, sorry for being late. My Zoom on the computer wouldn't work. They must have done an update or something. I hope you can hear me okay. Good. I thought I'd talk about butterflies this morning, because I checked and I'm not contracted to do anything else. And I think that's the interesting thing, isn't it? That contracts are forcing people to do things rather than through agreement. Quite interesting. In the UK, originally all contracts were written in French, because there's no ambiguity in French, and that stopped hundreds of years ago. But we still teach French in schools as the first language that's taught because of that reason. So we haven't really caught up, and I think it links back to yesterday when we say we get stuck into old ways. And of course, when it's written in English, English has different meanings depending maybe on the context. So if, for example, you were sitting around the fire at Christmas time and said, "Shall we eat grandma?" you know you're going to be tucking into the turkey soon. If you're huddled in the back of a sort of broken fuselage in a crashed plane in the Arctic, and you say, whisper to your brother, "Shall we eat grandma?" Grandma's probably in trouble. So context makes all the difference. And that's why lawyers get involved, attorneys get involved. And I don't know whether you guys have come across a book called Eat, Shoots and Leaves, where, and that's all about how the comma changes the meaning. So that's why lawyers get involved. Strange enough, the biggest contract I ever was involved in was for just over £100 million. We didn't sign anything. It was a reinsurance contract. The company did life insurance, and we had a reinsurance contract just in case a big event happened. We never signed anything. But I thought, well, let's have a look at my running experience and see if running through a desert has any significance to contracts. And I thought, well, yeah, it does actually, because I always tell people, when you're working out your nutrition plan for a multi-day race in the desert, you're doing it at home when you're thinking clearly, you've got all the facts at your fingertips, and you've made a plan. You stick to that plan, because when you're in the desert and you're hot and you're miserable, your feet hurt, your back hurts, you're tired, that is not the time to change that plan, because you made that plan up front. And it's coming back to what Johan said about best of intentions used in the worst. So I think, you know, that desert experience applies to contracts. For example, in a partnership, and you mentioned a marriage, make the contract really early on when you're in nice, comfortable situations, because later on, when you're falling out and having rows, you're feeling hot, your feet are tired, all that sort of stuff, that is not the time to make decisions. You need to make those decisions early, so they should be written into that contract. But like the nutrition plan, once you've made it, you just file it away and don't bother with it. And the other thing that struck me about running, everything in your rucksack has to earn its place. You don't take anything that's unnecessary, because you've got to carry it for 7 days. And I think that's where we get hung up, because sometimes we use contracts when we don't need contracts. When I was working in the life insurance business, it was a start of going online, and we wanted people to be able to buy online. And the problem there was they couldn't sign. And all the lawyers were saying, well, look, if they haven't signed, we can't enforce the contract. Now, why would we want to enforce the contract? Because they were paying us premiums. If they didn't pay the premiums, well, the contract was void. We paid out if they died. We paid out if they're ill. I said, was there ever a time when we used the contract to get out of paying a customer? And there'd never been one in 20 years. So I said, well, why do we need a contract? Let's just sign them up online. The fact they're paying the premium shows they want to pay. If we have to pay out for some reason on a contract we don't want to pay out on, we'll just do it, because the cost of doing business online is so low, we can afford to take a few hits. And that's what we did. We decided not to make them sign, because there was no point. So we did away with a whole load of contractual stuff. We did a whole load of lawyers. And to defend attorneys, we choose to use them. We choose to have that argument. They're just doing our bidding. So don't blame the attorneys, blame yourself. And I'm not an attorney. So I hope that kind of made sense. And now can I talk about the butterflies?
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, what was it? Flap of a butterfly's wings on one side of the world winds up in a tsunami on the other side. So yeah, I think that sort of goes the same for contracts that aren't carefully watched. But I must also say that I'm not sure that anybody sitting in the comfort of their own home planning a 7-day race through a desert is in their right mind, even when they're sitting in their home. So I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure that I agree totally with that one. But Jasper, how's your French? I'm not too sure.
Morning. I probably have more to say about French than contracts. French is one of the difficult languages that I've attempted to learn, and it's only a couple of years ago when I discovered Duolingo, which is a free app that you can literally learn any language of your choice, and one of the best written apps that keeps you engaged and involved. So yes, I am trying to get into my French. But in terms of contracts, I think most of the, I think, I didn't know what was the original start. I was busy with another call when that happened, but I thought it was about relationships rather than contracts. But I think if I look at the entities that I'm involved in, by necessity, the bank is a highly regulated environment, and you have to work within the regulations that's prescribed to you by law. But when it comes to the engagement with the client, the member who signs up for it, you want to make it as simple and as painless as possible. So collect whatever information you need to collect, but make it easy for, I think the strength of a business to me is how easy is it for me to enter and how easy is it for me to exit. And it comes back to the question on month-to-month contracts versus long-term contracts. And when people know they can exit quickly, they are probably less inclined to do so because they're now relaxed. But when people feel trapped, that's when they want to then escape the whole thing. So I'm all for that whole thing to make it simple and easy to move in, move out. So the exit is often a challenge. When I first started in the business world, I was so excited about this new world and working with friends and not realizing that today's friend is tomorrow's enemy. So I didn't pay too much attention to the exit strategy. I was more concerned about some other issues. And then it had to, I got involved with a few incidents where I had to then get into the exit side, and I saw then the unnecessary pain if you haven't figured that out up front. I recently, I think it was even the beginning of this year when it came to a conclusion. But in 2014, I started an entity, a financial service provider business where I was in partnership with another person. And at that stage, we were friends. But then as time goes on and the business got tough, a few very unhappy incidents happened. And I literally wanted to give him the whole business on a plate with no cost to him at all. To say, just take it over, take it further. I don't want to be involved with you because there's no trust. I had such a problem trying to give it to him because of the breakdown in trust. Now, just to some background, there was some dishonesty at what stage his wife was handling the books. So I took over the books, changed the password, and I handled the money to make sure that we complied with all the regulations. So for the last 3-4 years, we got all the finances cleaned up. We owed nobody nothing except him. And then we ended up with him now suing me for the money, his own company, which would mean we'll destroy the company. So that it's from that context, I wanted to just give it back to him. And he kept running to lawyers who kept writing me these essays. And I kept referring them back to the fact, but you know, what's the issue here? I want to give it back to him. Anyway, so eventually I could give it back to him by threatening him to report him to the FSB. But so yeah, I think the big thing is be clear on what is the enter, what is the exit, who's responsible for what, and even that can change as relationship or as the business develop. And then ultimately, what's in it for me? Manage expectations. Yeah, so I think I'll also suffice at that.
Right, thanks, Sasha. Yeah, some things can get complicated when they should be simple. Donovan, contracts and construction. I'm sure you're familiar with lots of those.
Yes, thanks, Ivan. Morning, everyone. Yeah, apologies for yesterday. I had a problem with my phone, but I think I'm sorted now. Yeah. In terms of contracts on the construction side, it's very important. But what sticks with me is the trust element. So I believe in the past they used to call it a gentleman's agreement, whereby the two parties just shook hands and they started from a position of trust, and that's how they used to do things. And then later on, when maybe the trust element disappeared or became less, then people were forced into contracts. And on the construction side, there are various options, and all of them are complicated. You need to have a bit of a legal background in order to understand. For example, one of the companies I was at, we had a separate legal department. When you just wanted to change one word, although it made sense to you, you were forced to go and consult with the lawyers for their eyes to have a look at it. And it's only when they approve it, then you're allowed to send out the contract. So it's critical what you put in there, because every word, every comma, every punctuation counts for something. And that's the sadness of it. The trust is replaced by contracts or legalities. And that's how industry has survived. And I think that's how a lot of people are forced to live by. If there's no contract, there's no trust. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Donovan. All right, Trevor, let's get over to you.
Right, I see we're right at about 8:34. So I've got 50 cents worth, not just 5 cents worth here, Johan. So I'm obviously a cynic, and that's because I've developed, the largest education franchise in the country. I had to, at the time that I sold it out into a listed company, I had all of those contracts. I had, in fact, I brought attorneys in to actually fix contracts and readdressed in the late 1980s the problem of the franchise industry. And that's why I was on the board of the South African Franchise Association then. So contracts, not worth the blooming paper they're written on. And so, just to simplify this little discussion, because I'm an absolute cynic when it comes to contracts. There's so much to talk about on this thing. Johan made a lovely comment. He turned around and said, one poorly written email can blow your contract out of the water. Well, for me, the reverse of that is about the strength of common law. Every single individual, and Ed actually brought up the point of context. So there's a different context for every single contract. It's so many different areas I want to touch on here. So the reverse of one poorly written email is one well-written email can actually multiply your common law rights. So get into thinking about, and this, so I tell you what happens here. I wrote that little, what came first, the litigation attorney or the contract? You've always got to have a look to see who's got a vested interest in whatever they're trying to sell you. And attorneys are trying to sell you what? And financial advisors are trying to sell you what? Okay, yes, in certain instances, these contracts, they're absolutely correct. But I think in terms of people who are listening to us, maybe first-time entrants in business, and I'm highly critical of individuals that are taking, think of a youngster. You're not getting married. You go to varsity, you go to a dance, you're asking a girl for a dance. You don't present her with a written contract, and you don't have a written contract at that stage. So your first time entry into business discussion or thinking about business or business relationships or business partnerships, when you're a startup entrepreneur, is really like starting to enter into a dance. And as a cynic, I maintain, I don't want to sign contracts with anyone in business I want to see, let's put everything into your hands and I'll see how you behave with all the money that comes in. And maybe after about 12 months of having a few dances and seeing how you operate, I might then think of entering into a dealing with you. And I think somehow this pushing you into contracts right up here, just it pushes my cynical mind to the fore and says, hey, where is all this coming from? Let me see what it is. Show me what you can do. Show me what happens when the money comes in. I'll leave all the money in your account. Then I'll see how you share it with me. And then I'll think about how we protect each other in this type of relationship. So, yeah, someone there, contracts equal no trust. Look, we live in a litigious society. 25 odd years ago, when we entered into our new democracy, we weren't following the American system. Very quickly, we started following the American system. We became a very litigious society. And this group of individuals who write these contracts out there started recognizing the power and the strength of their, and I think many people who write these particular contracts fall into the bullying mode because they know the vast majority of these contracts actually don't get to a result in court. You will find that they try and settle them before the end result. And in that settlement, they'll make certain that because they have a vested interest in the slice of that particular mediation. No, I'm just absolutely cynical about this industry, and that's why I advised my daughter to become an attorney, because it's a money-making machine, but contractually I can't get a slice of her income because she threatens to sue me on a daily basis. I think there's a lot to talk about. I made a couple of notes. Beware those with a vested interest in contracts, and also recognize this. If you're a street hawker, no, you're a beggar in the street, and you step in front of a litigious individual driving a massive Mercedes-Benz down the road, and you happen to dent that, you as the beggar in the street, you dent the front of that thing, but you're stone dead. That individual driving that vehicle won't do a thing. Why? Because you've got no assets. But if you have assets and you step in front of that car and that Mercedes-Benz jumps in front of you, guess what the driver of that Mercedes-Benz is going to do? So this is all about assets. If you've got assets, it then becomes extremely important to start protecting your assets from people who are litigious for correct reasons and individuals who want to come after your assets. So there are different contexts all the time. But what else did I write here? Yeah, I said I love attorneys. One day I'll tell you guys about how I took on the JSE, the Reserve Bank, and at the time the largest merchant bank, and beat the whole lot of them. And I wasn't an attorney. I'd spent a couple of years trying to get out of matric. And what I recognized is they were playing bullying games, and I wasn't going to bully. That's another story. That was back in 1990. I'll tell you about that some other time.
All right, Trevor, thanks. Yeah. Okay, folks, I think we're probably going to wrap it up there for this morning. I think maybe we'll pick up this discussion on a different vein tomorrow, but let's carry it forward. I think there's a lot more that we can still talk about. I think it's very interesting. You know, I've run my own software company for close on 30 years, and I've never signed a contract with a client. So yeah, it's interesting. And I've got clients that I acquired in 1991 that are still with me. So yeah, it's an interesting thought, whether these things have value or not in the process. But thanks for an interesting discussion. I look forward to tomorrow's continuation of this. I think it's there's lots to dig in and lots of thoughts that have come out of this morning that we can pick up on. So have a great day further, folks. Don't get too litigious, and we'll see you in the morning. Go well. Cheers.